Good afternoon and welcome to Washington Examiner's Over the Target, a show about all the investigations, salacious scandals, and stories and sagas that are out there in DC and beyond. I am Chris Irving, the managing editor. I am joined, as always, by Sarah Bedford, our investigations editor, and by Kaylin Dees, our Department of Justice reporter. It's nice to get the band back together. After no Sarah last week, but good to see you both. And I think we'll dive straight into it. And I want to start with the return of a main character from the 2023-2024 season of America, who's been somewhat quiet, but that is Jack Smith, who was, of course, the special investigator in everything, all things Trump. And he resurfaced and he has returned to save democracy as we know it. But it was an event that he took part in that seems to have gone under the radar a little bit. In fact, I think we were only kind of aware of it after the fact. A somewhat curious relaunch into the public eye. But Sarah, any thoughts on Jack Smith returning from the dead?
You'll be surprised to learn that I do have some thoughts about his return. I don't think the timing of his resurfacing is coincidental. You have the Senate Judiciary Committee and the House Judiciary Committee both is really starting to pull on the threads of what went on during his investigation. And then you also have, the word on the street is that the Justice Department is looking at putting together some sort of conspiracy against rights case to go after the people who weaponized the DOJ against Trump the first time around and also while he was out of power. Anything that sort of opened up the statute of limitations on what happened in Russiagate by tying it to a conspiracy that then continued into, where the crimes become prosecutable, which is less than 5 years from now, would ostensibly have to include the Jack Smith investigation as well. So there's a real possibility that Jack Smith could be someone who eventually comes under a criminal scrutiny if they're building a conspiracy case, if he's not under scrutiny already. And we know that Congress wants his testimony. So this has all the hallmarks of Jack Smith sort of pre-budding or attempting to already discredit in advance things that we might soon be learning about his investigation. And just to rewind a little bit, we already know, I mean, it already emerged in court that there were credible allegations of misconduct on Jack Smith's team that we know about. There was a very credible allegation from an attorney for one of Trump's associates that one of Smith's top prosecutors, Jay Bratt, threatened his career if he didn't get a witness to flip against Donald Trump. It was revealed that this same top prosecutor, Jay Bratt, also misled the court about the fact that Jack Smith's team did really mishandle the evidence in the classified documents case. And then they promised that they didn't in court, and then they tried to get away with acknowledging in a footnote in like 100-page filing that like, oh yeah, actually we like accidentally dumped all the classified documents into a pile on the floor and we don't remember what order they were found in, which was really relevant to Trump's defense.
That does seem quite relevant, yes.
It is.
Yeah.
That case was much more of a mess than I think it's often acknowledged looking back, a lot of the legal analysts will say, okay, maybe the Alvin Bragg case was politicized. Maybe we got a little carried away in Fulton County, but the classified documents case was airtight. That case was probably going to fall apart under scrutiny, even if Cannon hadn't thrown it out, or Trump hadn't won it. All of that to say is that there is no reason to suspect that Jack Smith's case was, clean and airtight, given everything that we've learned about what the DOJ was doing for a decade against Trump. But this time, everything was above board. And, I could go on and on about all the flaws of his investigation, but certainly I think his reemergence is getting ahead of what I think we'll learn over the next year or two about how dirty that investigation really was.
So what is the pre-buttal then that he's obviously emerged to give this talk where he seems to be talking about the future of democracy and the DOJ as we know it? Is this him muddying the waters already, being like, I was the good guy and they're the ones that are weaponizing the Justice Department and they're going after me and hey, nothing to see here and I'm a martyr. Is he going kind of for the James Comey defense here? What do we think?
Right. He has a lifetime of statements on record about how above scrutiny all federal prosecutors are, that if the DOJ does it, it must be righteous. I mean, his entire career points to that being his position, right? So now he sort of has to be on record saying, actually, this institution that I support fully, that I myself have used very aggressively against not just Trump, but other political targets in the past. I mean, that I have used in ways that go well beyond what we're seeing from the Trump administration. I actually think this institution isn't credible anymore. Let me just be out there saying, it's being weaponized now. Now it's okay to criticize federal prosecutors. I mean, remember, he got a gag order against Donald Trump in the middle of a presidential campaign to say that Donald Trump wasn't allowed to criticize the prosecution against him, which, like, imagine if the Trump DOJ tried to do that against Comey right now. Like, sorry, you can't post your TikToks about freedom and, weaponization because it puts me in danger. I mean, that's the type of stuff that Jack Smith was doing. And so now he kind of needs to be out there saying, like, ignore everything that my entire career was about before. Now I actually believe the DOJ is corrupt.
Caitlin, you look like you want to be tagged in, coming in hot here. What are you going to say?
Yeah, like I think that what everything that Sarah is saying is so important, but it's also extremely important to realize that what is trying to be accomplished, I believe, with this reemergence of Jack Smith is to get more eyes and attention on this burgeoning alumni group of former DOJ employees that are sort of brigading together under this larger umbrella called Justice Connection. And what Justice Connection appears to be trying to do to me is to sort of create this larger growing rebuttal that's going to continue to grow, likely as some sort of like opposition force of former DOJ alumni trying to sort of repackage like the deep state as like something that's like actually a good thing and something that needs to return at some point down the line, maybe, post Trump or whatever, as, like this is like we're the sane people. Make sure you listen to everything that we're saying, but more or less it's a group that's trying to cast doubt on every single thing that this Justice Department under Pam Bondi is doing, regardless of whether it's actually, a good thing or a bad thing. It's just everything that they're going to do is to try to say that this Justice Department is not being managed in a proper way, and it's almost intriguing to see that this is the approach that they're taking, that they're trying to basically say anyone who is formerly under Obama or Biden, or even, maybe some of the alumni in this group, probably have some, ties to the Bush, years, and to try to create a situation where saying that, anything but Trump, is kind of better for us, and that to me is the most sinister part of it, is that I think that they're really trying to push back against all the changes, all the changes that have been trying to root out weaponization and corruption within this this Justice Department. It's very like they're trying to paint Jack Smith as the this white knight, and that was very much on display with the Andrew Weissman interview that I watched the other day, and it's no coincidence that this is now happening, where we see a video that releases on Wednesday right after the Smith interview drops, and Smith is appearing again and saying Justice Connection was so nice to my former, office members who were fired. Now that they're all under this alumni network and they're helping them find new jobs and things like that. It's very like it kind of sugarcoats, what's actually happening, which is maybe this could become a future Democratic leaders, network that they pull from, where it's like, okay, we're gonna get all these alumni and Justice Connection to come join back in the Justice Department and usher back in this democratic deep state oriented justice.
So the devil's advocate argument there, though, Kellen, would be, I mean, isn't that sort of what Federalist Society and Project 2025 and Heritage had in effect? They had that kind of network of people kind of ready to go and step in. What's the kind of difference here in this Justice Connection? Did you say Justice League? Was Justice League was taken already?
Yeah, Justice League was already taken. I think that the main difference there is that Federalist Society, members are composed of people entirely that are, just in academia, for instance, and have no plans to sort of become federal judges at some point. And you also have the fact that, there's a lot of liberals that take part in, Federal Society events. That's not just for libertarians. It's not just for conservative judicial minds. It's for anyone who wants to have open debate about, things that are happening on more so the judiciary. Although,
Right.
obviously, that's fully intertwined with everything that's happening in the Justice Department too. I just think that Justice Connection seems very much more focused on recruiting and grouping in uh, former, specifically DOJ employees, notwithstanding the fact that some of the allegations that came out earlier this year that were being made about someone who's now a federal court judge on an appeals court, Emil Bove, were people who were previously or recently fired from the DOJ, went to become part of Justice Connection, and now through this network, they're able to amplify these concerns about different staff in the current DOJ making accusations and making them more, amplified in the media because, hey, everyone, come look at us. We are formerly the experts, the expert class. And we're now, putting out press releases about, this corruption that occurred today in the DOJ or that corruption. And, we want you to pay attention to us because we were formerly the ones in charge and we're mounting our campaign to get back in charge or something like that. It's very, to me, it's very sinister what they're doing because they're just trying to, make themselves look more official whenever they're actually jobless and looking for new firms to go
They're
look
just
for.
looking for a LinkedIn hang where
Right.
they swap contacts and have a mixer once a month. That's all it
Yeah.
is. Fine.
But there's another really important answer to your devil's advocate question, which is that Federalist Society, the Heritage Foundation, they are openly conservative, right? They're not going out there and saying, we represent nonpartisanship. This is a society of like-minded people. There's an ideology behind us. Justice Connection is a group of people going out to say, we represent nonpartisanship. What we say is expertise that's not partisan. And yet it's very clear that they are all coming from a strong ideological point of view because they're organizing for one reason, and that's to discredit the
Yeah.
work of an administration they don't like. So that's another, he keeps describing it as sinister. I think what we're, missing a little bit here is this is a group of people masquerading as civil servants when this is a
Yeah.
Democratic opposition group. And it kind of is proving Trump's point. All of these people are very obviously liberal Democrats. They're trying to prove they're nonpartisan by forming a Democratic opposition partisan political group. It just sort of proves that all of this stuff was being executed by people who didn't like Donald Trump.
Hmm.
Um, my final question, I guess, on that, and I didn't realize we were going to be talking about Justice Connection so much, but I'm fascinated by it, is does this bubble up because there is this kind of lack of what I would say political opposition to the Trump administration, where, we've been talking ad nauseum for 9, 10 months now that the Democrats don't have a leader, that they're completely rudderless and Joe Biden has been put out to pasture. No one wants to hear from Kamala Harris, and Gavin Newsom's just kind of too busy trolling everybody. Does that, do you think that that creates this, maybe an opportunity for this League of Extraordinary Gentlemen to kind of come together and mount an opposition, or do you think it would have kind of happened regardless?
I mean, I think that, you have people even, I think a great example is this group that was formed recently by Andrew Bates, formerly part of the Biden administration. The name's escaping me at this time, but it's basically an advocacy policy group that, tries to center itself as being more of a centrist coalition based, like, we're gonna find, moderate ground. And I think that, when you're talking about people were questioning what did Democrats do wrong? What have they done to sort of, lose their base and their momentum? And a lot of people, had speculated that they became too partisan, too extreme. So I think that when you're seeing what we're viewing now, I think that I think you're witnessing an effort to try to appear as nonpartisan as possible, but with the intent of, like doing that as a strategy to to correct whatever caused people to lose you the first time. So it's like, these efforts to appear overtly centrist, I think buried beneath them are more partisan, aligned, efforts to do something. But, how are you going to win people over first? You're going to try to, center yourself as a moderate. And then once you have, a coalition base, then maybe you can start to find things that are going to actually be a little bit more of a, draw an actual distinction or something that's going to, push against whatever the party in power is. So I think that, whether it's Justice Connection, whether it's another group that's, founded by somebody that's formerly part of the Biden administration, I think that you're talking about efforts to just, get people back on your side again, because it's like, it's been crickets for a long time for the Democrats. They haven't been able to find networks that really actually wind up doing anything. Even these No Kings protests feel very like artificial. And who's saying, "Hey, you want to come out to the No Kings protest with me this weekend?" Like, show it
I
to
don't know.
them.
Chuck Schumer is going, so I don't know if that sweetens the pot for you.
Yeah,
Uh,
I saw that.
Last thing that I would say on this is that it is very much giving 51 national security experts say the Hunter Biden laptop is Russian disinformation, right?
Yeah,
There is a very real possibility that Trump is coming to like huff and puff and blow their house down of everything the Biden DOJ did. I mean, we're already starting to see this, even if some of these cases against these Biden DOJ people don't make it to a conviction, you're going to have a lot of embarrassing stuff come
yeah.
out in discovery about what the Justice Department was really up to when they were trying to get Donald Trump. And in Jack Smith's public remarks, by the way, it was so ironic that he was talking about how the Trump Justice Department is bad because it's outcome driven, right? They've decided that James Comey, for example, needs to be prosecuted and they found a way. That is exactly what happened in the Trump case. There was no
Yeah.
clear crime that Trump committed on January 6th. They just decided that he needed to be prosecuted for that because it was a terrible day for America. And they found a crime that maybe could be stretched to fit that. And the Supreme Court, by the way, said you can't do that actually when it finally got up to them. So all of that to say that I think that, Democrats especially prioritize expertise, and even their voters are like really love institutions. So you kind of sort of need to lend an air of expertise, experts say, in the biz, to the pushback that they'll have against, I think, some really embarrassing stuff that's going to come out about them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate you talking me through all that. I think if I don't know if Jack Smith is kind of the Batman of the Justice Connection, but I'd like to just pivot to the Superman of the Justice Connection, and that's James Comey, former FBI director.
Mhm.
There is development in his case this week, and I believe it revolves around moving to disqualify Lindsay Halligan from the case. Kaylin,
Mhm.
maybe you just talk us through that a little bit and why Comey's seeking to kind of throw sand in the gears there.
Yeah, so in order to understand this, I think you kind of have to go back a couple of months ago, whenever we've been seeing how the prosecutors that Trump's been placing in some of these localities, such as Nevada or such as New Jersey, have faced some pushback. Uh, let's just kind of focus on New Jersey because I think that was the one that took the most interest, surrounding Trump's former attorney, Alina Habba, who he named to be the U.S. attorney there for the Garden State. And what has happened is she doesn't have a Senate confirmation, and there was a bit of a question about whether she would ultimately be able to get a Senate confirmation. So a couple months ago, we saw this decision to sort of retract her nomination from the White House made that decision to retract the nomination and to essentially put her in as more of an interim slot. So I think, Sarah, is it your understanding it was acting and then interim was essentially the way that it went, right? Or do I have that
I don't
reversed?
remember the order, but it did was flipping back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah, and so because of this, sort of like switcheroo, they were able to get around 120-day time that you have in order to get your acting attorney into a official Senate confirmed slot. So we went from giving her the acting title to the interim title in order to prolong her stay as the U.S. attorney. So after that occurred, there was a criminal defendant that had a case that really doesn't matter to the story, but was basically challenging Alina Habba's ability to lead as the U.S. attorney in New Jersey. Court hearing was held over her lawfulness, her status in that position, and a district judge decided that she had been unlawfully appointed, that this sort of like workaround that the Trump administration had tried to keep her in that office didn't really stack up to muster. And then there's currently an ongoing appeal of this situation. So this isn't a resolved issue by any means. This is something that technically the Supreme Court could hear, although I don't know if they're going to, because I've talked to different people about this who say that this may not be something that really stacks up to something that the court would want to weigh in at this time. But I digress. Comey is going to try to basically make the argument that uh, the removal of the last U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, Eric Siebert, um, and the to replace him with Lindsey Halligan was a move that was unlawful for a number of reasons, notwithstanding the fact that he'll probably make the argument that she doesn't have any experience as a federal prosecutor, and let alone maybe having the experience to become the lead of an office like that. And we haven't seen Comey's arguments yet that he's going to make about this. So it's a little bit difficult to say what sort of constitutional grounds he's going to claim. All we know is that the judge that's going to be deciding this, whether Lindsey Halligan can stay in her position or not, is going to be someone other than the judge, Nachmanoff, who is actually weighing the Comey indictment. So there's going to be a different judge that's eventually going to decide whether Halligan can stay or whether she can't stay on the case. And to be clear, if she's removed, it kind of takes on a similar type of effect of what we saw with Jack Smith in Florida, where he was the lead prosecutor in the classified documents case. Judge Cannon decides that Merrick Garland unlawfully appointed him to be special counsel over that indictment, and suddenly you have a fading case, and you ultimately saw the classified documents case get dismissed, as we talked about earlier. So it's not exactly a parallel issue, but it is kind of interesting how we saw, Jack Smith in Florida, his case fell apart in a very unusual way, in a way that, involved a judge deciding that he wasn't lawfully appointed. So it's not on
Yeah.
the same categorical issue, but it does kind of come back to that problem that we've been seeing, where if you don't have a Senate confirmation as a U.S. attorney, these are the problems that you start to run into if you're not in a Senate confirmed position. So I think that that's going to be very interesting to see Lindsey Halligan, fighting that. And making, it'll be interesting to see her arguments, her office's arguments about why she should be able to remain on the case. I mean, I think that, from my standpoint, it looks like, a president should have the ability to place people into these positions who he sees fit, regardless of whether or not the person has, the proper experience. But we do have the Senate vote to consider that if someone hasn't been confirmed, you know, is is this something, that they just stay acting or interim the rest of their career? I mean, I think that we've seen that happen before, and it doesn't really seem to be a problem. So I think it's one of these things that Comey is ultimately going to, just pull any sort of tool out of his pocket that he can. And he's also going to challenge the case likely on selective and vindictive prosecution grounds. I don't really think that he has a leg to stand on when it comes to the selective argument. The vindictive argument seems like it's also going to be difficult, just because I don't think that Trump saying something about him in a negative connotation or context matters whenever he's done the exact same thing to Trump. They're just rivals. They just like to say things against each other, and that's completely fine. It doesn't mean that, just because I said something ill toward you means that if you get indicted, that means that you get a get out of jail free card because I, said you look stupid or something. Like it doesn't matter
Yeah.
to
I
that
mean,
extent.
look, ultimately, I think whether there's a conviction or not, I'm not sure that necessarily matters. I think what Trump wants to do, or what his Justice Department does, is you want to kind of make life just uncomfortable, right? So even if, similar to the cases Trump was going through, Trump didn't get convicted on anything, but he had to spend a heck of a lot of money, and he had to turn up in court all the time and come off the campaign trail, and it was designed just to make his life miserable and uncomfortable. And I think there's a certain element of that here where, regardless of whether there is eventually a conviction or not, and maybe the case does fall apart, but it sure is taking up a lot of James Comey's time, I'm sure, and probably draining his resources as we speak as well.
The pain can always be the punishment. And that certainly felt like that's what happened with Trump because he didn't get convicted. He just had to go
Yeah.
through a lot of pain, and that was a punishment for sure.
That's right. It is not about the destination, it's about the journey.
Hmm.
Anyway, speaking of things like classified documents, I just want to touch briefly on, and I don't want to date us too much because by the time this is released, we might have an answer here, but it sure seems like a John Bolton indictment is imminent. Sarah, anything you'd like to kind of add regarding Bolton and what we're expecting here?
You sure would. Yes. I think that Bolton keeps getting cited as another example of this quote unquote retribution or weaponization from the Trump DOJ. But it is important to remember that the Biden DOJ was the one that sort of advanced this case to the point where enough evidence had been collected that a serious potential crime was suspected. And the timing of when that was shut down was awfully politically convenient for Joe Biden because around the time that this John Bolton probe was reportedly shut during the Biden administration was the same time that Joe Biden himself was under investigation for doing something really, really similar, which was retaining classified documents intentionally to work on his memoir. Both men were accused of doing that. And it would have looked pretty bad if Joe Biden had gotten off on that and John Bolton had not.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the political context for what's happening to John Bolton now. And the one other thing I'll say, it's almost not worth pointing out the double standard of like the corporate media anymore because it's so ubiquitous. But if this was the tables were reversed, like we had the letters next to everybody's names reversed and John Bolton was a Democrat and this was like this would be an example of bipartisanship from a Democratic DOJ, right? Like, oh, they're going after fellow Democrats. Like, this is a Republican DOJ going after a Republican. And, when the Biden DOJ went after Eric Adams in New York City, which is another one of these like politicized decisions that we keep talking about, the mainstream media characterized that as evidence. Like, how can Biden be weaponizing his DOJ when he's going after somebody who has a D next to his name? Even though it was widely perceived that the reason the Biden DOJ singled him out was because Eric Adams had become a Biden critic. But when, it's Bolton and he's a Republican, it's obviously weaponization because he said mean things about Trump. But all of that to say is that this is one of the stronger politicized cases that it seems, what we know so far, that the Trump DOJ has been building, and they were only able to bring it this quickly because of the work the Biden DOJ did.
Right, right. Well, look, we'll wait with bated breath to see if this comes down. I know that we will be on top of it the moment it does. I just want to shift track very suddenly and screechingly to one more topic I wanted to discuss before we call it a day. I know that there was an interesting update on everything that's going on with Antifa. And Kaylin, I believe you were doing some reporting that kind of centered around the people that turned up to the White House for this Antifa task force meeting or whatever it was with Trump. It was a bunch of journalists, some of whom are people might know names like Andy Ngo, who's done a lot of reporting from Portland in particular, I believe. And they kind of gave their 2 cents on taking on Antifa. But Kaylin, what is the basis of your reporting here? What are you kind of chipping away at?
Well, we're trying to find out what the FBI is really doing as far as its investigation with Antifa, because we know that there's a serious thrust by this administration to investigate Antifa. They've declared, labeling them as a domestic terrorist organization, and it's something that all leaders in the DOJ have been adamant about, that they're going to be looking at these insurgent leftist. In some ways extremist people that are protesting in the streets, and it's complicated because there is that problem that sort of lurks when trying to look into this, is like who do you go to, who is a leader of this group, who is where are they getting the most of their funds. That seems to be sort of the $1 million question for so many people, is like, where do protesters that consistently dress in black bloc get their organization and structure? We've done a lot of good reporting with Mia on the Antifa Inc. series, that I think that she's been able to really help explain how these types of communist, insurgent leftist groups try to organize in places like Portland, and how they have done that for so long. But what we learned is that there's at least an effort by the FBI to talk to journalists who have covered Antifa, literally the ones that have been out in the streets for years, that have been interacting with these people, whether it just be filming them or seeing the way that they operate. One of the sources that I spoke to, kind of had this question about, why is this happening now? Like, why is this happening in October versus why didn't this happen back in the summer? It's just general questions,
Mhm.
like the impression from the source that I was speaking to, that had been reached out to by FBI agents, was essentially that they were glad that the FBI was taking an interest in it, but also that they were concerned that they didn't have all the answers that the agents would want, and that there would be other information that
Right.
they might need to get from other sources. So I think that to me, like, it drives open the question, that drives the question open further, is who else is the FBI reaching out to besides reporters who have had interactions with Black Bloc protesters, and people who are throwing things at ICE officers, and vandalizing their properties. Is like, like, who else is the FBI reaching out to at this time besides some of these people? Some of the people that we can name openly that we've seen, talking about it, include Nick Sorter, who was initially arrested in Portland, but later released, and his misdemeanor offense was dropped. He got a lot of attention from the White House because that seemed like such an egregious arrest in his case in Portland. And we also know that even Glenn Beck said recently, of the Blaze, said that he was reached out to by the FBI. And he had previously done an investigative series on Antifa. So the outsourcing of FBI intel to people like journalists, especially in this group, is very interesting to me. I mean, it makes me think one of two things. It makes me think that there could be a whole host of other people that the FBI is reaching out to, that we just don't know yet. I've been trying to get a hold of them to say, like, hey, who else are you talking to? We're not getting any response on that. But it also makes me a little bit worried that if they are reaching out to journalists, and we don't know who else they're talking to, like, is hopefully they have better sources than this. I at least hope that they have better sources than this, because we want to get to the bottom. But I think that it ultimately does make the idea that the Trump administration, if they are looking into like some very high wealthy donors that could be backing this type of color revolution, type protests, like people like perhaps George Soros, that they do need to have the tools in their arsenal, things like, bring the ability to bring RICO cases, or, and investigate these types of, uh, you know, theories under RICO, because the way that these groups could be funding Antifa could be a lot less directly, you know, like there could be a lot less direct leads of there could be more of like an octopus, if you will, of different
Yeah.
ways that these groups are being funded, and that's why I think that RICO, as a tool, would be probably very helpful, if the administration is looking to see if there's high dollar donors that are essentially helping keep these protests, and oftentimes that turn to riots, uh, you know, happening over and over, and especially into the fall. I think that's another really strange thing too, is that we often see these protests taking place just in the summer and they die off in the, fall and the winter. I think it's very unique that we are, about to enter the middle of October and we're still seeing lots of riots happening in the streets.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I think we got to kind of leave it there. And talking about Antifa again is probably worth another show in itself. Perhaps maybe next week we can dive further into that. But for now, thanks very much for both of you again talking us through everything. And until next week, have a good one. Thanks.